Tess of the D'Urbervilles. Chapter 1. One evening in May, a middle-aged man was walking home from Shaston to his cottage in Marlotte. His legs were weak and trembling, and he could not walk in a straight line. He carried an empty basket on his arm, and his hat was old and worn. After a while, he met an elderly parson riding a gray horse. The parson was singing quietly to himself as he rode. "Good evening to you," said the man with the basket. "Good evening, Sir John," said the parson. After another step or two, the middle-aged man stopped. He had a puzzled look on his face. "Now, sir," he said, "we've met on this road twice in the last month. Both times I said good evening, and you answered good evening, Sir John, as you did just now." "Yes, I did," said the parson. "So why do you call me Sir John when I'm only John D'Urberville?" asked the man. After a moment's pause, the parson spoke. "I am Parson Tringham, the historian. I called you that name because of a history I made some time ago. Don't you know, D'Urberville, that you are a direct descendant of the old noble family of the D'Urbervilles? They descended from Sir Pagan d'Urberville, a knight who came from Normandy with William the Conqueror." "I've never heard about it before, sir," said John D'Urberville. "Well, it's true. The D'Urbervilles once owned land and served their king for hundreds of years, and there have been many Sir Johns among them. If sons could still inherit a knighthood from their fathers, you would be Sir John now," said the parson. "Well, I have always thought I was the commonest man in the parish," said D'Urberville, "but I have an old silver spoon and an old silver seal at home that I got from my father. I've often wondered how he got them. So, where do the D'Urbervilles live now, parson?" "There are no more members of the noble D'Urberville family, and their land is all lost," said the parson. "Their bodies lie in the churchyard at Kingsbury sub Green Hill," said John D'Urberville, paused. "What should I do about it?" "Oh, nothing. It's an interesting piece of history, that's all. Good night, D'Urberville." When the parson was gone, D'Urberville sat down by the roadside with his basket beside him. Before long, a young man appeared in the distance. D'Urberville explained what he had just learned from the parson. "Go to Marlotte," he asked the lad. "Go to the Pure Drop Inn and tell the innkeeper to send a horse and carriage for me. After that, go on to my house with this basket and tell my wife to drop whatever she's doing and wait until I come home. I've got good news." The lad knew John D'Urberville well and didn't believe anything the older man had told him. At first, he refused to carry the basket and the messages into the village, but when D'Urberville gave him a shilling, the lad ran off happily toward Marlotte. D'Urberville lay down on the grass beside the road to wait for his carriage to arrive. The village of Marlotte lies in Blackmore Valley. The valley is a fertile place where the fields are green all year and the streams never run dry. The villagers still follow many ancient traditions. On holidays and festivals, the young women gather to dance, as their ancestors have done for hundreds of years. This evening, the young women were all dressed in white for the May Day dance, which carried a peeled willow twig in her right hand and a bunch of white flowers in her left. One beautiful young woman called Tess wore a red ribbon in her shiny dark hair. The dancers walked down the road and around the Pure Drop Inn. They were about to go into one of the fields beside the inn. When they saw a carriage go by, John D'Urberville sat beside the driver, leaning back with his eyes half closed. He was waving his hands above his head and singing loudly enough for everyone to hear. "I've got a family vault at Kingsbury, and I did forefathers in lead coffins there." All the women laughed except Tess. She blushed with embarrassment because it was her father in the carriage. "Father's tired, that's all," she said quickly. The other women laughed again, but when they saw how miserable Tess seemed, they stopped laughing and continued walking toward the village green. By the time they reached the green, Tess was smiling again. Soon the dancing began. At first, because the men were still working in the fields, the women danced with each other. Later, when the men finished their work, they came to watch and joined the dancers. Three young men who were strangers in the valley also stopped to look. The eldest explained to the villagers that they were brothers, taking a walking tour through the area. They asked about the meaning of the dance and why the women wore white dresses. The two older brothers wanted to continue their walk, but the youngest seemed more interested in the dancing. He dropped his knapsack and walking stick beside the road and opened the gate to the field. "What are you going to do, Angel?" asked the eldest brother. "I want to join the dancing," said the young man called Angel. "You can't," said his brother. "You can't be seen dancing in public with a group of country women. Come along, or we'll never find a place to sleep tonight." "I'll catch up with you in 5 minutes," said Angel. "I promise." The two older brothers reluctantly walked on, while the youngest entered the village green. He stayed for a while and danced with many of the young women. When he finally left the dance, he saw Tess looking at him with sad eyes. He thought she seemed annoyed because he hadn't chosen to dance with her. When he reached the gate, he paused for a moment and looked back. He could see the white figures of the women dancing about with their partners, but the pretty woman with the red ribbon in her hair stood apart from the others, watching him. He regretted that he hadn't noticed her earlier and asked her name, but it was too late to do anything about it. He hurried away to catch up with his brothers. Angel had made an impression on Tess too. She watched the young man walk away until he disappeared around the bend in the road. Only then did she return to the dancing, but she no longer enjoyed it. She kept thinking about her father and his strange behavior earlier in the evening. Finally, she decided to leave the dancers and walk home. After the excitement of the dancing, the inside of the cottage seemed duller than ever. It was small and dark, and the furniture was old and worn. 6 young children were crowded into the room, which was lit with one solitary candle. Tessa's mother was washing clothes as she did every evening. She stood with her arms in a tub of hot suds and sang as she locked the baby's cradle with one foot. Joanne Doverfield had once been a pretty woman, but having so many children had aged her. Still, it was easy to see that Tess had inherited her mother's looks. "I rocked the cradle for you, Mother," said Tess gently. "Or should I take off my best frock and help you with the washing?" "No, don't bother, but I'm glad you've come," said her mother. "We've found out that we're the oldest family in the whole country. Our real name is Dobyville. That's why your father rode home in the carriage. It wasn't because he'd been drinking, as most people thought." "I'm happy about that," said Tess. Would it do us any good, Mother?" "Oh, yes. Your father thinks that great things may come of it," said her mother. "I expect our noble relations will visit us in their carriages as soon as they find out." "Where is father now?" asked Tess suddenly. Her mother did not answer her immediately. "He saw the doctor today in Sheston. He doesn't have consumption after all," she said. "It is fat around his heart, the doctor said. He might live 10 more years, or he might live 10 months or 10 days. Tess looked worried. To think that her father, who was suddenly a gentleman, a great man, might die so soon. "But where is father?" she asked again. "Now, don't you get angry. The poor man felt so weak after the news that he went up to Rollibus half an hour ago. He wants to get up his strength so that he can deliver that load of beehives tomorrow. He'll have to start just after midnight because it's so far away." "Get up his strength?" said Tess angrily. Tears came to her eyes. "Oh my God, she's gone to a public house to get up his strength, and you agreed it, Mother?" "No," said Mrs. Durbeyfield. "I didn't agree. I've been waiting for you to come back and mind the children so I can go out and bring him up." "I'll go," said Tess. "Oh no, Tess, I'll go." Tess knew her mother had probably encouraged her father to go to the inn. She often suggested it because whenever he went drinking, she had to fetch him home, and whenever that happened, she always stayed for a while at the inn and had a drink with him. An hour or two at Rolliver's with her husband, away from the cottage and the children, made Joanne Duffield happy. Tess understood that it was one of the few bright moments in her mother's hard life. Mrs. Durbeyfield went out and left Tess with the younger children. Tess took the linen that had dried during the daytime and prepared to iron it. Her 9-year-old brother Abraham and her 12-and-a-half-year-old sister Louisa put the younger children to bed. Tess was 4.5 years older than her sister Eliza, who everyone called Lisa Lou. There had been 2 children born between them who had died in infancy. Next in age to Lisa Lou was Abraham, and then 2 more girls, Hope and Modesty. Then there was a boy of 3, and a baby who was just 1 year old. It grew late, and the children's parents had not returned from the inn. Tess looked out of the door and saw that the village was shutting down for the night. Candles and lamps were going out, and some houses were already dark. Tess didn't think her father should be at the inn this late celebrating his noble ancestors. He was in poor health and supposed to start on a journey on midnight. "Abraham," she said to her brother, "will you go to Rolliver's and see what has happened to Mother and Father? You're not afraid, are you?" The boy shook his head and put on his hat before he disappeared into the night. Half an hour passed and Abraham did not return. "I must go myself and fetch them all back," said Tess to Lisa Lou, and she started on her way up the dark and crooked lane to the inn.